given the vast number of humanitarian crises both throughout history and those which are taking place in the world as we're in this theatre. The show is merely scratching the surface, but we still have work to ensure that each piece puts a spotlight on different crises and their effects on people in a sincere, realistic and artistically accomplished way. Before we press on with the show, I would just like to say a few words. I worked with refugees and asylum seekers about 8 years ago in County Kerry with Tralee Refugee Support Services. Back then, society did not want to know about refugees or asylum seekers. As long as they were kept in direct provision centres, people did not have to think about them or acknowledge them in any way. In fact, it could be argued that the direct provision system was set up precisely for the purpose of separating those seeking asylum away from the general population. Now, I don't mean that everybody was like that, but there certainly was a strong presence of it. You could have called asylum seekers and refugees forgotten people, except that they were never even acknowledged in the first place for them to be forgotten. Fast forward almost a decade, and due to the recent tragic death of little Aylan Kurdi and his brother Ghalib, and society has finally acknowledged these humanitarian crises. It is heartbreaking that it took an event like this to make people realise just how unstable the world around us is, and what that does to people. When now that society as a whole has seen it and empathised with it, please let's not forget. You may have noticed that after the initial week of shock, after the picture of Aylan's body were published, when it was all over the news and social media, that the intensity of coverage, certainly in the case of social media, drastically decreased. This worries me. It worries me because I'm afraid that society will go back to the way things were back when I was working with refugees and asylum seekers, that people will forget. We cannot do this. If we forget, we are dishonouring these people. The entire world has now seen in one photograph what the madness in this world is doing. These people are not others, then, they are us. Us as in, we are all the one, we are all the same. And we too could at any moment be in the same position as our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. We need to be mindful of this at all times. I know I keep saying it, but we must not forget, and we must act. When we see something on the news, let's not just think for ourselves, Jesus, that's terrible, and then forget. Let's act. We need to take our concern and our shock and our empathy and our revulsion, and we need to take action. They are little more than open prisons, and in my opinion, are a serious human rights violation. On being put into these centres, people are denied the right to work, they're denied the right to earn a proper income, their living conditions are basic at best, and they exist in a limbo until finding out whether or not they have been granted their status, which can take years. In years to come, direct provision will be seen as this generation's equivalent of the Magdalen laundries, and this nation will look back in shame at what the residents have had to endure. Direct provision is inhumane, it's cruel, it's rancid, and to be frank, I cannot believe that any government in this day and age will get behind and enforce a system like this. It robs its residents of their basic human rights. It robs its residents of their basic human rights, it puts them in a limbo, and attempts to render them nothing more than a sheet of paper. It is a gross human rights violation, and it needs to be abolished. And we need to fight for it to be abolished. So, on that note, thank you so much for your time and for attending the show. Any questions anybody may have, there's a questions and answers session here in the auditorium after the show. So, just the writers, the directors and the cast members, and thank you so much again.